An algorithm looked at 27,000 houses, said buy, and burned over $500 million in the process. This wasn't some reckless YouTuber flipping rentals. This was Zillow, a Fortune 500 tech company that genuinely believed its code could outsmart the American housing market. In just 3 years, Zillow Offers went from the future of real estate to a textbook warning about what happens when you trust a model more than messy reality. Let's rewind to the dream.
That's this website, Zillow.com. You plug in your address and it gives you an estimate of what your house is worth, but they call it a Zestimate because of the Z in Zillow. How do they? I just don't have that creative bone.
For years, Zillow's magic trick was the Zestimate, that little number you type your address in to see. The algorithm's guess at what your home is worth. That tool turned Zillow into a real estate giant, and the company asked a bold question. If the algorithm can price homes, why don't we just use it to buy them? The new plan was simple on paper. Use data and AI to identify good deals, instantly offer cash to homeowners, fix the houses quickly, then flip them for a small profit a few months later. Call it iBuying, sprinkle in some Silicon Valley swagger, and suddenly real estate looks like a scalable software problem. For the average homeowner, it sounded almost too good to be true. Instead of cleaning for weeks, repainting, fixing little things, dealing with agents, scheduling endless showings, and praying for a decent offer, you could just click a button. Type your address, answer a few questions, upload some photos, and boom, a cash offer shows up in your inbox, sometimes within a day. No strangers touring your bedroom, no haggling over repairs, no wondering if a buyer's financing will fall apart at the last second. Compared to the old way, open houses, awkward negotiations, months of uncertainty, this new algorithm-powered route felt like a cheat code. And that is exactly how Zillow sold it. Less drama, more certainty, powered by data. On paper, it looked like a win-win. In practice, it became a very expensive way to discover what happens when software underestimates just how wild the housing market can be. Zillow started small in 2018. Phoenix, Las Vegas, a few test markets. The pitch to homeowners was seductive. No open houses, no strangers, no waiting. Click a button, get an offer. Sell in days. Zillow would charge a modest fee, do the repairs, and rely on its algorithmic pricing to make money on volume. It wasn't trying to make $100,000 on each flip. It was trying to make a few $1,000s per house, thousands of times over. That only works if your pricing model is razor sharp. For a while, it looked like magic. The housing market was hot, prices were rising, and buying today to sell in 6 months looked like easy money. The algorithm didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be good enough in a world where everything was going up anyway. Internally, the company kept getting more confident. At one point, Zillow accelerated so fast that in some quarters, it bought more homes than it had in the previous 2 years combined. The machine was fully switched on, and the bet was clear: scale first, fine-tune later. Inside the company, that surge didn't feel scary at first. It felt like victory. Slide decks showed growth curves bending up and to the right. Internal emails and town halls celebrated big purchase milestones. We just hit X homes this quarter. We're on track to be the biggest iBuyer in the country. When investors asked tough questions, the answer was scale. The bigger the inventory, the more data, the more efficient the machine would supposedly become. Teams were rewarded for volume, market share, and speed, not for quietly raising their hand and saying, "Should we really be paying this much for this many houses right now?" Zillow wasn't just trying to participate in iBuying. It wanted to dominate it, to become the Amazon of housing. That mindset is powerful when you are right. When your pricing model is even a little bit wrong, it is like turning up the volume on your own mistakes until the whole street can hear them. Here is where the story quietly turns. The model had been trained on a relatively normal, slowly moving housing market. But the real world didn't stay normal. The pandemic hit, rates fell, people fled cities, bidding wars exploded, and different local markets started behaving in wildly different ways. The algorithm was still doing what it was told: forecast prices a few months out and bid accordingly, but the environment around it had become chaotic. In some cities, prices kept rocketing. In others, they cooled faster than expected. The one thing an algorithm hates is when the future stops looking like the past. By 2021, internal signals were flashing red. Analysts later described what happened in one brutal phrase: a volatile error rate. That means the algorithm wasn't just occasionally wrong. It was wrong by different amounts, in different directions, at different times, in ways that were hard to correct quickly. Some homes were underpriced and lost to competitors. To fix that, Zillow tuned the model to make more aggressive offers. That worked, but a little too well. Now the algorithm was often overpaying, especially late in the boom, just as some markets were starting to cool. Imagine a system designed to buy thousands of houses where making an extra 5% mistake is the difference between nice profit and we just lit millions on fire. In 2021, Bloomberg and others reported that Zillow had purchased tens of thousands of homes, around 27,000 since launch, but had only sold about 17,000 of them. That left the company sitting on a huge pile of inventory it had paid a lot for, at a time when buyers were suddenly less eager to pay whatever price the algorithm had assumed would be easy. From the outside, the first clue the party was over came in October 2021. Zillow suddenly announced it was pausing new purchases for the rest of the year, officially blaming operational capacity, not enough contractors to fix all the homes. Behind that statement, though, there was a much uglier number starting to appear on earnings reports. In the third quarter alone, Zillow had to write down around $300 million because it had bought homes for more than it could sell them for. Analysts estimated that as many as 2/3 of the homes it purchased that quarter were underwater, worth less than Zillow had just paid. Think about what that means. A pricing engine built to find profit had, in certain markets, flipped its sign and was now systematically locking in losses. The company was stuck with thousands of homes, each one quietly bleeding money through taxes, insurance, utilities, and maintenance, while the market refused to rise fast enough to bail them out. Holding on to them and praying for a rebound would have meant tying up billions on the balance sheet. The only way out was painful. Admit defeat, sell as many as possible, even at a loss, and shut the entire experiment down. In November 2021, Zillow did exactly that. In one bombshell announcement, it said Zillow Offers would be wound down and around 25% of the company's staff, roughly 2,000 people, would be laid off. Over the following months, filings and later coverage showed just how big the hole was. The home flipping segment lost hundreds of millions of dollars in 2021 alone. Some tallies put the program's total losses around $550 million on the way to nearly $900 million when everything was counted. The company's stock, which had once peaked above $200 a share when the iBuying dream was in full swing, plunged as investors digested the news. Behind those headline numbers were thousands of actual houses. Zillow scrambled to offload roughly 7,000 properties, many marketed in bulk to institutional investors. In some cities, people started noticing streets where multiple Zillow homes appeared on the market at once, sometimes with noticeable price cuts. The same brand that once promised to simplify home selling was now doing the exact opposite, becoming an example locals pointed to when they complained that big companies were treating housing like a casino. But here's the part that rarely shows up in earnings calls or investor decks. For many local buyers and sellers, Zillow Offers didn't feel like a clever tech experiment. It felt like a glitch had entered their neighborhood. In some cities, traditional buyers would walk into a home, like it, check the price, and immediately feel confused. The house had been listed by Zillow, sometimes for less than what Zillow had paid just months earlier. Other times the price would drop again, and again, almost on a schedule, as if the algorithm was slowly admitting defeat in public. People joked that you didn't need to negotiate anymore. You just had to wait for Zillow to blink. Local real estate agents noticed something stranger. Homes that should have sold quickly were sitting. Renovations were inconsistent. Some Zillow houses looked freshly flipped, others barely touched. It became obvious that this wasn't a careful human making judgment calls. It was a system trying to unwind thousands of decisions as fast as possible, hoping losses in one place would be offset somewhere else. That works in spreadsheets. It looks messy in real life. And then There were the sellers. Some had happily taken Zillow's cash offer at the peak, thinking they had beaten the market. Months later, they watched the same house resurface online for less than Zillow paid them. That felt like winning, until people realized what it implied. The algorithm hadn't just mispriced homes, it had misread the direction of the entire market. At the same time, small investors and flippers started circling. Zillow's inventory became an opportunity. Instead of competing with the algorithm, smart buyers waited for it to unwind. Bulk deals appeared. Discounts widened. The tech giant that once promised to out-optimize everyone was now providing bargain listings to the very people it aimed to disrupt. This is the moment when the illusion really broke. Zillow wasn't setting the market anymore. The market was disciplining Zillow. Every price cut was a public admission that the model had been too confident. Every unsold house was a reminder that housing doesn't move at software speed. You can't push an update to a kitchen. You can't refactor a neighborhood. What made this especially painful was timing. Zillow didn't fail because it entered real estate at a bad moment. It failed because it scaled aggressively at the exact moment when conditions were about to turn. When prices were rising, the mistakes were invisible. When momentum slowed, those same mistakes became impossible to hide. And once you're holding thousands of homes you overpaid for, there is no elegant exit. There is only liquidation, layoffs, and a very public walkback from the idea that this was ever just a data problem. That's when Zillow had to face the uncomfortable question it had avoided for years. Was the algorithm broken? Or was the idea that housing could be treated like software flawed from the start? So what went wrong under the hood? There wasn't just one failure, it was a stack of them. First, the core assumption that home prices could be reliably forecast a few months out at scale turned out to be far riskier than Zillow expected. Real estate is local, slow, and full of weird details. A noisy neighbor, a school boundary, a backyard view the model didn't properly value. Second, Zillow's own CEO later admitted that the unpredictability of prices far exceeded what we anticipated. In other words, the model's error bars in real life were much wider than they looked in backtests. Third, incentives inside a fast-growing tech business pushed the algorithm in a dangerous direction. When the system initially bought too few houses, leadership didn't say, "Slow down, this is a warning." They told the team to adjust the model to bid more aggressively so they could hit ambitious volume targets. That is classic growth culture. If you built a machine to buy homes and it is not buying enough, you fix the machine. But in a market this lumpy, making the model more aggressive doubled the downside if conditions turned. That is exactly what happened. Fourth, data lag killed them. Algorithms learn from historical data, but Zillow was operating in a market where conditions were changing month to month. By the time the model learned from recent sales, the environment had already shifted again. Humans on the ground, real estate agents, small flippers, could feel things cooling in real time. An agent hears, "We had no offers this weekend." That never happens here, long before that shift shows up in spreadsheets. When you lean too hard on a model and not enough on people close to the ground, you respond too slowly. Finally, there is the simple business reality. Flipping houses is capital intensive and brutally unforgiving if you misprice inventory. This was not a software feature you could A/B test and quietly roll back. Every bad prediction was a real house, in a real neighborhood, with real carrying costs. Multiply a few $1,000s of error by tens of thousands of properties, and suddenly you are staring at a $550 million lesson. Yet, there is one more twist. Zillow's core business, the ad and listing platform, remained profitable. It was the AI-powered side bet that threatened to drag the whole company down. That is why this story now shows up in talks, articles, and even exhibits like the Museum of Failure. People use Zillow Offers as a symbol of what happens when companies confuse "we have a lot of data" with "we fully understand the system," especially in something as emotional and complex as housing. You can almost imagine an alternate timeline where this story ends very differently. But the Zillow Offers saga proves it is a terrible thing to blindly bet the house on. If this story changed how you see smart real estate and algorithmic investing, Do not let it end here. Share this video with someone who still believes any model is too big to fail. Hit like so it reaches more people who love business and tech breakdowns. And subscribe for more deep dive case studies on the deals, disasters, and decisions that quietly shape the economy around you.